Hey there! Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 215 is titled Build Your Own Stage with Jennet Ingle. Hey there, friend. It's Heidi, and thank you so much for being here. Today's episode is a conversation that I had with a new music friend of mine, and her name is Jennet Ingle. Not only is she the host of the Crushing Classical podcast, but she is also an oboist, an educator, a digital course creator, a reed maker, and so much more. So now that we are at episode 215, I try to always mix things up a little bit and put a nice twist to certain episodes to bring you new flavor, new perspectives, new people who inspire me. And so Jennet happens to be an oboist, and she's the first oboist through the Flute 360 podcast. So help me welcome her to this 360 stage and learn from her. I want you to really consider the nuggets that she is sharing with you today. And it ties in beautifully to Saturday's episode, which was all about building your own stage. So if you have not listened to episode 214, check that out because I give you tangible steps in order to start building that stage. So you can be elevated, so you can be seen, so that way you can create creative and financial opportunities for yourself and for your career. Enjoy the conversation. So I guess we can officially start. When we start talking with friends, it's kind of weird because it's like, is this the beginning of the conversation? And I think that's where it's magical. You and I met only a month ago, and here we are making a new friendship. And this friendship is blossoming, and we're already on each other's podcast shows and submitting proposals to the Ultimate Music Business Summit and buying each other's books. Well, I'm buying your book, but it's amazing. And so I'm so thankful that you're here, and I can't wait to pick your brain. I would love for you to speak to the listener and just share a little bit about yourself and your background, because I think that's really important.
Thank you, Heidi. And thanks so much for having me on this podcast. You're exactly right. We only met so recently. And it feels like we've been friends for such a long time. So yeah, I'm Jennet Ingle, and I'm a performing oboist, and I serve and help oboists and musicians. My mission sort of is to just help creative people to get past the struggle and to find ease in their life. And I started doing that for oboists, specifically for the oboe community, right? I've had a reed business for 20-something years because reeds are always the first barrier that oboists think of. So I just want to make it easy. I want it to be less of a barrier. I want the music that is inside people to just be able to come out. And from there, from selling and offering reeds and reed making classes and reed making videos, like supporting oboists in that way, I expanded a few years ago to actual programs that really help oboists to get past the barrier of the oboe, which is not insignificant, right? Of the woodwind instruments, it is the fussy one. It is the complicated one. It is the one that is going to fight you the whole time when you're trying to perform. So I created a program called The Invincible Oboist, where I support oboists in getting past the struggle, in finding their own creativity in music making, and in solving the problems that the oboe throws at you. And as I've really enjoyed and thrived in supporting oboists in this way, I feel like I have a wider mission as well, which is why I wrote my book, The Happiest Musician, which really is about looking at your own creative life, looking at your own financial situation, looking at your own entrepreneurial dreams, and saying, okay, this is what I want my life to look like. How can I make that happen?
Hmm.
And really, I want it to feel as easy and as joyful for every musician out there as it has for me to be a performer, to do the work that I want to and love to do, to help people in the way that is the most aligned and easy and joyful for me to do. Like
Hmm.
everything that I do has been such a joy, and that is what I'm trying to share.
Wow, that was an amazing mission statement and scope of your career. Like you just laid that out really beautifully. And the question that I get asked a lot from the Flute 360er is how do I make my own opportunities? So can you talk a little bit about that? You've hinted at it through your introduction, right? But you said in that introduction you noticed that you wanted to serve the oboe community, the oboist, right?
Mhm.
And so you've created these other opportunities for yourself outside of, I'm using air quotes here, outside of the traditional job, like playing in an orchestra. And you mentioned like serving your oboe community through reed making classes or other remote courses, right? How did that endeavor start? Like, when did you pivot and say, huh, there is an untapped market here. I can create X for them
Mhm.
by serving them and then being able to support myself creatively and financially.
Honestly, I think it's been a long evolution because when I came out of conservatory, I was absolutely 100% in the mindset of, okay, now that I have finished my schooling, I must get a job. The only way to identify myself as successful, the only way to be successful as a musician is to have a job in which one employer is paying me a paycheck and offering me benefits and like giving me the credibility that I need to feel successful in my life. That is 100% the mindset I was in my 20s. And so I took audition after audition after audition. And, as I'm consistently taking auditions and I'm in the semis and I'm in the finals and I'm in the runner up and I'm eliminated from the prelims, like, how auditions are just absolutely like that.
Oh, yeah.
As I'm doing this, meanwhile, I'm starting to work, right? As a freelancer, I show up in like different orchestras up to 200 miles away from where I actually lived, and I'm doing little adjunct teaching positions at colleges, and I've got, my little middle schoolers and beginner oboists who are coming to my home to take lessons, or, worse yet, I'm going to their homes to give them lessons. And as I'm doing all of this actual work in the field and not feeling successful because I've been taking auditions and not winning them, I began to realize that even within these like quote unquote air quote unsuccessful things that I'm doing, I'm teaching adjunct at a college, which we know is for the birds, right? It makes no money and you have no control and like everything about it is kind of terrible. But I'm doing it and I'm figuring out as I go along ways that I could make this be more aligned for me. I'm doing the stupid adjunct teaching, but while I'm doing it, I'm going to like put these kids together in a group so that we can learn reed making together. And it turns out that teaching reed making in a group is so much more fun to me
Mm,
than dragging people through it in their 30-minute lesson in place of being able to work on actual music making.
mm,
And that was something that I learned as I went along.
mm.
And I was, playing with a whole bunch of different regional orchestras, and I realized that what I really wanted was to play more solo repertoire. So I got myself a pianist and I booked a little church and I gave a little recital. And, my friends came and his friends came and like a couple of the church people came. And the first time I did it, I was like, how dare I give a recital just because I want to? But
Really?
but having done it, I realized that that's something that I could do, and I didn't have to wait for the colleges to offer me a paid recital slot, and I didn't have to wait for the colleges to say, "Oh yes, we also need you to do a read making class." I'm like, "No, my students need a read making class. I'm going to do it." So it was very much an evolution for me, realizing that I could create the things that I wanted to do. I could do it for myself. And if the college wasn't going to, have it as an idea and pay me for it, well, guess what? I could charge people. I could just sell tickets. I could sell. These are things that I could do. I was already making reads for my students. I was already like somebody had asked me sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
No, I love it.
The read business that I run started out because one person, one freelancer who was in my town and who was, sort of higher on the freelance totem pole than I was, needed reads. She was having hand problems. She couldn't keep up with the playing that she had to do and also read making. So for years, a year or two, I guess, I made her reads full time. And that's when I realized that I could do this, that this was something that I could offer more than just to myself. I could support somebody else with their read making journey. And when she no longer needed my services, I was like, oh, well, I really miss doing this. I really miss making this small amount of money. And I really miss having a systematization to my read making. If I have to make only reads for myself, I'm going to labor over each one as though it's a complete gem and try to make every single one work. But if I'm trying to make twice as many reads as that, I'm just sort of going for basic reads. I want competence. I want them all to sort of work. And that's easier than, again, I think I'm being a little bit unclear, but all of my entrepreneurial activities now really came from the realization that I had when I was younger and still trying to take that one step that would tell me that I was successful. That kept not happening. And so I made my own ways to be successful.
Oh my goodness. Well, not that the conversation is going to end here because I still want to pick your brain, but the conversation could end right there because there were so many gems in that answer. It would take me another hour to unpack each gem. So thank you so much because I'm over here. Y'all can't see me, but I am over here so giddy. And she can see it because my eyes are lighting up when she says a certain gem or nugget or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, it's taking everything in me not to completely interrupt you with every nugget only because of pure excitement. I resonate with that story so much. And the biggest takeaway that I can pull out from that beautiful answer is you notice the breadcrumbs. You notice oh, why am I waiting for that search committee to say I can teach X class? I can just teach the class. That's how very much so in my pivoting journey as going into being a musicpreneur, it was very organic as well. And I remember being in the finals of this one flute position out east, and they were asking me how I would contribute, how would I revolutionize the flute studio at their school? And I said, I would offer a podcasting class for musicians. And they looked at me like, why? What are you talking about? And I explained myself. I explained how podcasting has really helped lower my performance anxiety. It has helped me become more musical through my flute because I'm speaking through a microphone. And I gave very tangible reasons why I would offer a podcasting musician course. The point in this story is they were just baffled, didn't understand, and kind of poo-pooed it. And then I didn't get the job, which is fine. To each their own. That's the risk I was willing to take. And then I was really bummed. They didn't get it. They didn't see my vision. And I resonate so much because I was seeking the credibility of a title through a college. And then I took a step back and I noticed, I was like, well, if you really notice, Heidi, the answer you gave, you were so passionate about it and you were so gung-ho about it because you believe in that system. You believe in that resource for musicians. Why don't you just teach the class and charge people what it's worth? And the podcasting musician was born. So I think so many times, and I'm hearing your story and my story, and these are only two stories, but I hear this on repeat how people, and it's probably the way perhaps musicians were trained, and perhaps this happens too much. And unfortunately, it can really dampen the creative process and the opportunities for putting out those ideas out into market. We don't know that
Yes.
we have permission to do that, what you just said, the reed making class or the podcasting musician class. No one has given
Yes.
us permission, right?
Right. And we absolutely don't need it. And the thing that I really resonated with from your story is that, like, it's very personal, right? The your answer to that interview question was an answer that no one else would have given, because this was the passion that you had discovered, and this was the thing that you were doing with your life that felt so aligned and so crucially important. And if you had gotten that job, then suddenly the 15 flute players in your studio, the 8 flute players in your studio, are the only ones who are going to get that magic from you. They were the ones who were going to reap the benefit of your articulateness, of your passion, of your excitement about the future of musicianship coming through podcasting. And as it is, because you didn't get that job,
Yeah.
this is available to everybody. And the people who are meant to find you are finding you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to stress that nugget from your story about the reed making class and validate it to the listeners, like, hey, here's the story about this reed making class and the story about the podcasting musician class, to connect the dots and to see what's available to you. What are the possibilities for you and for your career? Not that we are giving you permission. You don't need permission from us. But once you hear these testimonials, I think it's easier to realize, like, oh, wow, the possibilities are endless. What am I passionate about? So as you were noticing the breadcrumbs and noticing, oh, I don't need a specific title, I don't need a search committee to say you can present and you can perform your own recital, you can just do it and get paid to do it. How were there resources or were there people to help you notice those breadcrumbs? Obviously, a lot of it was on your end with your own paradigm shifts of realizing, oh, okay, I can just do the thing. But were there any people in your life at the time or resources that aided that journey?
I think, I mean, obviously, I've worked with business coaches and with creative coaches over the last few years, especially, who have really been instrumental in helping me to see the possibilities that already existed in my business. But I would actually like to tell a story from probably 10 years ago. And I'd been running my reed business for a long time. I started it back in 1998, and it had grown so slowly, so organically. It was just this little side thing that I was doing, and I really kept it very much on the down low. Like, I didn't talk to my musician colleagues about the fact that I had this source of income that wasn't, technically performing with orchestras, because I had this sort of shame about it, which, even as I look back at that now, even as I say that, I'm like, that's ridiculous. Because what difference does it make, actually, how you bring in the money that you need to live, if it is something that brings you joy and, for me, was in fact a creative act? But this is just preamble. I had been running this reed business. It had been growing slowly, only through word of mouth. Like, maybe I was doing some Google ads, but maybe I had a Facebook page at that point and was sharing photos of reeds. But, I'm still keeping it sort of very small. And I got a call from a woman who had a reed business of her own. And I think that the actual conversation that she wanted to have was one about me doing some cane processing for her business. And that wasn't an aligned fit. But as we were talking, she was just very chatty, and she was a few rungs along the business ladder ahead of me. And she used words like bundling, and she used words like return on investment, and she used words like profit. And I was like, oh, I recognize those words sort of peripherally as business words, but she's talking about her reed business. And it was really at that moment that I thought, oh, I think what I have is not just like a source of small checks coming in regularly. I think what I have is a business, and I wonder what would happen if I considered my return on investment. I wonder what would happen if I considered my profit. I wonder what would happen if I expanded the things that I am offering to include other things that oboists need. And it was really then that I thought, oh, right now I'm selling finished reeds. That is the thing that I do. But that means that I'm only selling reeds to people who want finished reeds. But what about the people like me who just need another knife every now and then? What about people like me who need cane? What about people who aren't great at reed making and they want to buy half finished reeds so that they can finish and tweak them for themselves? What about people who want shaped and processed cane? What about people who want a reed making kit? What about people who want to learn about reed making? Like, all of this came to me as just a download from on high. And it came from this conversation with this reed maker who was just like probably 3 steps ahead of me in her own entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Ooh.
Because like I'm looking for inspiration all the time.
Yeah. No, kudos to you, because we're never done learning, even, post graduation of X degree or the conservatory for you. We're always learning, and that's why I really love being a teacher. But I'm going to put a pin in that. Going back to when you said the floodgates open, I just noticed like the clouds parting, this information just being like digitized in your brain, and just like, boom, a huge download. That's amazing. And so putting the right people on your path, pulling the right people into your orbit was a defining moment for that process. Hey there. Let's take a little break from the conversation. Garrett and I are co-hosting a 2-day workshop on August 25th and August 26th, 2022 from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Central Time. You may know this, but I have a second podcast, and it's called The Pivoting Musician. Garrett and I are the co-hosts, and we want to serve you this week. We hear you. We have been listening to 360ers and TPMers, and you're saying the same thing. I don't know who I serve. So yes, you can build your stage like we're talking about today. You can build, but if you do not know who you are serving, then that's a problem, and we don't want that to happen. So come to this workshop. We are going to help you identify who your audience is, so that way you can package your offerings together that much better to bring your tribe to your light. Go to the show notes below, click the link to register, and we will see you soon. Thanks.
Yes. And, that's true the entire way along, right? Like business happens at the speed of relationships. Your relationship with me, my relationship with you is a case in point, right? We met a month ago and the synergy is just exploding for us.
Yeah.
But, I was talking with somebody else on my podcast who started up an ensemble featuring music of women and composers, Ashley Ertz. And she told a really similar story. She's like, well, I put together this little chamber concert and then that was wonderful. So I wanted to do another one. And then I wanted to do an orchestra concert. So I talked to this person that I knew who had a venue. And I talked to this person I knew who was doing these amazing art installations. And I talked to this person that I knew who had access to some of this music that was in a library somewhere. And basically she described creating this entire orchestral performance unpaid. Like she wasn't getting paid, none of the musicians were getting paid, but she hired a full orchestra and a conductor, and they got music, and they had a venue, and they sold tickets, and it was the linchpin of their first season. And every aspect of her story was like, and then this other friend of mine who did this, and then this other friend of mine who had access to these things. And it's all just about conversation and who you meet, and not how you can find out what they can do for you, but how you can find out what you can do for each other.
Yes, 110%. Can you remember exactly how you said the relationship business piece? You said something, the business will grow in tandem with
At the speed of relationships.
With the speed of relationships. That's genius. I completely agree with that. Like, That's something for me, like when I build relationships from a very genuine and authentic place,
Mm-hmm.
like what you said, if you go to somebody inauthentically and you're like, ooh, what can I get out of this person? People are super intuitive. They're going to smell that from a mile away. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can lead with this heart of servitude and put the person first, how can I support them?
Mm-hmm.
Then naturally and organically, if that person's on the same page with you, on the same wavelength as you, they're going to naturally return that favor and then opportunities unfold.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I say a lot through 360 is those opportunities are going to unfold from the relationships that you build. And when I speak of opportunities, like whether it's financial, creative, whatever, you need people. You need people in order for those opportunities to unfold because we can't do it alone.
Right. We can't just design things that we think might be fun, sitting at our desks alone, and then release them into the world and make $1 million. Like, it takes
Hmm.
being in conversation with people to know what people need, to know what people have, to know what makes the ideas exciting and makes the ideas stick.
Hmm.
So, I've made it a mission to just be in conversation with as many people as I can be. And some of those conversations end cheerfully, and we say, okay, so nice to meet you. So very nice to meet you. We should do this again, with no intention of ever doing it again, because not every person is a bosom friend.
No.
But it's been amazing. Even with my little conversation with the reed maker, like, we didn't end up being fast friends. We've
Mm-hmm.
spoken a few more times over the years, and I'm not even sure that she knows how influential that conversation was for me, because we were just having a conversation and she just used
Mm-hmm.
words that were in her vocabulary that
Mm-hmm.
weren't in mine, and from there the aha happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it's magical, and I wouldn't have come to that without that conversation.
And you made a really good point, and you said sometimes those friendships or sometimes those relationships will blossom and sometimes they will not. Let me know if you resonate with this on some
Mm-hmm.
degree. I think that's why a lot of times musicians, and myself included, there's no judgment here. I think that's why we are afraid to even initiate, because I think we're under this impression that it has to cultivate and scale. And if it doesn't, then why initiate it? But what I'm hearing you say is just initiate, see how the conversation goes, see if there is synergy. You don't know until you put that out there for you to have
Mm-hmm.
those conversations. And once you have these conversations, then you can realize, oh, wow, there's possibilities here for myself and Heidi. We can do the Ultimate Music Business Summit. We could do XYZ, but you don't know if you don't have that initiation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's a question in there. I'm more or less validating you, but do you resonate with how I'm picturing why musicians perhaps don't even begin the initiation? Because they may be under the impression that something has to come from it, but that's not necessarily true. It could scale in another season.
Yes. And I think this is very resonant with how musicians are raised and brought up through the system. We're taught to keep the messy part behind closed doors. Like, we spend our time in the practice room making sure that everything is perfect before it sees the light of day.
Mm.
And we get together for rehearsal with our colleagues after we've learned all of the notes of our part. And,
Mm.
ideally,
Mhm.
like, we have a plan for how it's going to go before we get together musically, because that's what it is to be a responsible musician, right? You don't just go in experimentally and hoping that things might be okay. You make sure that you, like, understand the notes and rhythms on your page, and you've listened to 3 recordings, and you know what an appropriate tempo range might be. Like, you've got the plan in place. And part of that's a lot of solitary work.
Okay.
So one of the things we're trained to do is keep everything very close to the chest until it's really ready for prime time. And the other thing we're trained to do is do all of the work ourselves
Mm.
until we, like, can't possibly anymore, until, like, you've learned all of the notes of your string quartet, but it's not actually going to be magical until you get with another violin, a viola, and a cello.
Mm.
So I think about myself in my 20s, and I was such an introvert. I'm still an introvert, but I hide it well. I was such an introvert that it would never have occurred to me to just reach out and have a conversation with a person without having an explicit goal in mind for that conversation and an intention of getting off the phone as quickly as possible.
Mm.
And what I know now, what I realize now, is that it's all experiments, right?
Mm.
Like, no matter how well I know my piece of music, once I get into the real world and once I'm doing applied music making, I'm sitting in the orchestra, I'm sitting in the chamber music group, I'm even like playing solo on a stage, I don't know how it's going to go. I'm going to have to react to the conditions on the ground. I don't know how the conversation, to bring that metaphor back, is going to go before I start. I don't even know if I'm going to have any fun. But the worst case scenario is that in 45 minutes I get off of my Zoom call and I've had a conversation in which I have practiced listening and responding, and maybe something has sparked for me. And the best case scenario is that there's the spark of some collaboration that we can go forward with. And I don't know how it's going to go until I've done it, but I have to be okay with that experiment. I have to be okay walking out on stage, like knowing that I've done everything I can to prepare and not knowing exactly how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I love that.
But you couldn't have told me that when I was 20.
Okay. Oh my goodness. So many gems again. So I'm curious. It's probably two-part. What I'm hearing you say is there's some strategy in the sense of making sure that those conversations are had in the week or in the month, in the sense of making it a priority in your business. So being strategic in the sense of saying, well, I need to make sure that I'm actually, if I know opportunities unfold from relationships, I need to expand my orbit with new relationships and cultivate former relationships so that way these opportunities can keep coming in and out of my business. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you make it a priority, and that's the strategy part where you ensure that X amount of conversations are being had, but from this very authentic place. It's not a numbers game. It's not like, ooh, I need to, you know what I mean? And then it also sounds like the flip side of the coin. It also sounds like you are letting life happen and you notice like these new relationships coming in totally organically on their own. And then you explore that relationship and say, where can this go? Is that correct? Am I kind of hearing you right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you almost said it best a little bit ago when you mentioned just following the breadcrumbs.
Okay.
I try to be really alert for people that interest me, for conversations that are being had online, in a group coaching program I'm in, with me, one-to-one. I'm always listening, and I'm looking for something that I can think about, that I can explore, and I am 100% open to immediately a yes if someone's like, "Hey, we should get on a call." I'm like, "Okay, let's get on that call. Let's see what
Nice.
happens." In different seasons of my life and in my business, I am differently strategic about seeking out those conversations. Right now,
Okay.
like, because I've moved into the Crushing Classical podcast, the conversations are finding me in a way that is really joyful and fun.
Okay. No, I'm just curious because the reason why I asked that is because I think again, and I might be assuming, and I don't want to assume because assumption can be dangerous. But when I notice these conversations from 360ers and other musicians, I think the main mistake that we make sometimes when it comes to, building these opportunities, putting people first, is I think a lot of people wait for their door to knock. I feel like a lot of people wait for Jane or Joe to come to the door to initiate it, but that's not always going to happen. So that's why I was kind of getting inside of your brain and asking, like, yes, she's noticing, but when I say strategy, I guess what I'm saying is I'm noticing that you are being the initiator to some degree. Yes, you can notice. If you notice, like, oh, there's an amazing conversation happening through a Facebook group, somebody saying something that really resonates with me, instead of just letting it lay flat in the sense of like, oh, okay, that's nice. And then you go on about your day, you're initiating it to keep propelling that conversation forward, to be exploratory, to say, I wonder how this will unfold. So the initiation part, I think a lot of times we wait for somebody else to do that, but we need to be courageous to embark that initiation.
Yes. And I think I could be more proactive than I often am
Okay.
in initiating conversations, exactly as you say. What I
Okay.
have started doing, if I'm in conversation with someone in email, if I'm chatting on Facebook, I will often suggest a
Hmm.
call. And sometimes
Okay.
it doesn't go anywhere and sometimes it does.
Okay.
But I think it would certainly be possible and
Hmm.
desirable to be
Hmm.
more proactive than I am about
Okay.
seeking out those conversations.
Hmm. Well, you're very humble because I see you as such a go-getter, and you really are an inspiration just to watch you work and how you put your offerings out into the world and how you do pull people into your orbit. It's very noticeable.
That's really lovely to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't mean to go down this like rabbit hole of initiation and conversations, but because I think you do it so well, it's not a fluke of how these different opportunities are unfolding for your business. When you were describing Reed, and by the way, you are the first oboist on the Flute 360 podcast.
Right? I should probably tone down the read making conversation just a little bit for
No.
the audience that I'm talking to.
No, not at all. They're perfect examples. So how you're describing, reed making and reeds as this big umbrella. You said, who needs the reeds? Who can I provide reeds to? How can I serve my people understanding reed making? I mean, you spit it out like probably 20 different offerings under that umbrella,
Oh yes.
you know?
Yes, because the umbrella is Jennet Ingle oboist, and maybe the umbrella is actually Jennet Ingle, the happiest musician.
Yeah.
And the question always is, what am I thinking about right now, and how can I more helpfully serve more people?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
I have a lot of offers out. You're exactly right. You've noticed that I've been sort of doing a lot of things recently. And a little bit it's throwing spaghetti. Like I had offered recently a Read Business 101 class. It was a one-off class where we talked about what it takes to start a read business. And I had offered a little like 4-week The Happiest Musician workshop series where
Hmm.
we talked about like what is it that you want in your creative career and how could you move closer to that, and like what does the money have to look like in order to do those things. And I offer of course the invincible oboist and how do we deal with like the tools of being an oboe player, and then how do we be more creative with those tools. And
Hmm.
I've got a virtual intensive this week for my core audience of adult oboists about being expressive on the oboe. And so I'm
Hmm.
throwing around a lot of different offers right now because they don't feel that different to me. Underneath my umbrella,
Okay.
they are all me. They are all interesting to me, but
Okay.
they're definitely for different audiences. So I would describe that I'm running experiments right now, and I'm working on how do I get people in a room and talk about these topics, and where does the momentum feel like it's catching on, and how can I be more helpful?
So if X offering is catching on, do more of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what it feels like sometimes being a musicpreneur is throwing spaghetti at the wall in certain seasons,
Mhm.
and then noticing what is sticking. Is a meatball sticking or is the sauce sticking?
Right,
What
exactly.
about the noodle?
Mhm. Where's the magic happening? Like
Hmm.
where is it connecting with the audience?
Hmm.
Like when we actually like get together and do it, where is the conversation feeling the most juicy?
Hmm.
And every time I have a conversation, I learn something about how I can be more useful, how I can be more valuable.
Hmm. So we've talked a lot about you pivoting into these new opportunities, you creating new opportunities for yourself and for your business, thinking about how you can serve your audience through these different classes and, more
Mhm.
products, services, and offerings. If there's somebody on the cusp, they are at a threshold and they're just banging their head against the wall thinking, I want something more out of my career, right? And I
Mhm.
want I want to create possibilities for myself, but I don't even know how to start. way back 40 minutes ago, you said it so well. And I know we covered a lot of ground, but is there one piece of advice that you would give this person who's on the cusp of pivoting into a new realm, a new journey, a new path, and they are so fearful? They're just so fearful, and they're just like, I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. What advice would
Mhm.
you give them?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, there is help out there for anybody who is in that situation. No matter what you're trying to create, no matter how unique it is, and I believe that it is unique, that thing that is in your head, somebody before you has created something that rhymes with it. And it took me actually a long time to realize that everything I was building was not some like unique unicorn situation that had never existed before. There is help out there. It could be in the form of a coach like Heidi or like me. It could be in the form of somebody who you see that is like 2 steps ahead of you on a journey, who you could get in a conversation with and ask. It could be in the form of just doing some Googling. So there is help out there. You do not have to do everything alone. And in fact, conversation can almost always help your idea to blossom.
Mm,
And my other piece of advice is don't be afraid to just start, because action begets action. And once you take a step, even the step might be opening a Google Doc and throwing your ideas messily down on it, because that always helps me to sort out those ideas. Like seeing them in black and white is very different from having them flitting around in my head.
mhm,
Maybe the idea is, maybe you've got that part done and your next step, the scary step, is putting the offer out there. Like
mm,
it is scary, it's terrifying, but unless you start, you won't know what happens next. And if you start and you get no momentum whatsoever, that's information. But more likely, if you start and someone reaches out and says, "Oh, that's interesting, tell me more," then suddenly you've got another action step and another and another.
hmm.
So it's 2 pieces of advice, really. It's get help and it's just start.
I love it. There is clarity in action.
Yes.
I can attest to that. And you're right. Sometimes the action, you mean well, and you're like, oh, yeah, I've really sculpted out this idea, and you throw it out there, and then it just flops or whatever. And you're right.
Mm-hmm.
There is information in that as well. Just
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't pan out the way you had anticipated doesn't mean that there's not feedback there. There is.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that it wasn't quite right, but now you've got more information than you did before.
Yeah. Ooh. Uh, I could talk to you for another hour,
Right?
but I want to respect your time. And there's going to be a part 3, part 4, part 5 to this. I'm not even worried about that. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain. Thank you for offering so many gems to my audience. And I'm so appreciative of your time. Where can people follow you via socials in case they want to contact you?
Mm-hmm. I am on Facebook with a professional page at Jennet Ingle Oboist. I am on Instagram at Jennet Ingle. But really, my website, jennetingle.com, is the hub for everything I do. From there, you can find my YouTube channel. From there, you can reach out and like book a little consultation with me. From there, you can just email me and like we can start a conversation too.
Yeah. Nice full circle
Mm-hmm.
for the entire conversation here. And your book, The Happiest Musician,
Oh my gosh.
where can people buy that?
It's on my website also, and it's on Amazon.com. You can get it as a Kindle there. You can get it as a paperback book there. The Happiest Musician, How to Thrive in Your Creative Career. It came out just this last February. It's my pride and joy.
Mm. It's sitting on my nightstand, and I cannot wait to dive into it. The intention was to read it before our call, but August just got away from me. It was insane.
August has been a lost month for me so far.
Yeah.
Just
I'm
totally crazy.
not quite sure how it's August 15th,
Hmm.
but here we are. Well, thank you so much again, and I hope you have a blessed day.
Heidi, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking with you as always, and I have such admiration for everything you're doing with Flute 360.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. You are amazing. So, friendly reminder, we have a 2-day workshop coming up on August 25th and 26th, 2022 from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Central Time. If you need help identifying who your audience is and how you get to serve them through your different offerings, this workshop is perfect for you. And if you need some more guidance, if you need some more support from mentors like myself and Garrett, then consider applying to the Pivoting Musicians course. It begins September 1st, 2022, and applications are due no later than Tuesday, August 30th. Go ahead and click the links below, schedule your call, so that way you can talk with Garrett and I. We really want to make sure that it's a win-win, it's a perfect fit all the way around. So we have limited spots left in the class, and we have limited spots left to schedule a call with us. This call is 15-30 minutes, nothing too intensive, and it's a time for us to get to know you better, to make sure that you are in the right season in your life for this pivoting course. If you want to start building your own stage and you don't know how to go about it, let us help you. Click the links below and we will see you soon. Thanks. Let's talk about Flute.